listen to it. Let's listen to it.
Hello, this is James Studinger, author of Wealth is a Choice. We want people to have a great relationship with money. It shouldn't be so complicated, but it tends to get that way. In this podcast, we aim to simplify finances and help you get wealthier. Today, we're going to take the mystery out of the Roth workplace retirement plan, most commonly the 401k. Unfortunately, most people see a 401k as a pre-tax retirement savings vehicle, and that needs to change. There's a paradigm shift with the 401k savings from pre-tax into Roth that hasn't happened yet. And I hope by the end of this video, you learn exactly why you should probably never save into a pre-tax retirement vehicle again, but instead use the Roth, which is available inside your workplace retirement plan. So in order to help you understand this, we're going to go through the history of the self-directed retirement plans, some of the flaws that we had in the industry, that some of the industry may have even advised you to do. We're going to identify what the reality of the end game is, why you save money in the first place. We're going to talk about two different millionaires, both of them having the same amount of money, technically on paper, but one of them being a lot richer than the other one. We're going to talk about some more flaws, the reality of today's timing, why the Roth is so much more important for you than it was 10 or 20 years ago. Talk about contributions versus conversions. There's a big difference there. You want to make sure you get that one right. Show you a few case studies so you can see on paper the reality of how much more valuable it is for you to have tax-free income in your future. So, and by the end of this, I hope that you have all the information that you need in order to fully understand why you should probably never save pre-tax into a retirement plan again for the rest of your career. So let's start off by talking about what retirement meant for people back in the, I guess pre-80s. I got into the business in the mid-1990s, and at that time, there was this new thing called a 401k. It had technically been around for a little while. There was a law enacted in 1974, ERISA. It brought about the development of a lot of workplace retirement plans and non-workplace like IRAs. And we associated all of these savings with pre-tax retirement savings that would grow tax deferred. And then when we get to retirement, sometime in our 60s or maybe 70s, we'd finally spend that money that we accumulated. And at that time, when we spent the money, it would be a taxable distribution. And this incentive was put in place because we needed a change in our retirement plan system. Most people prior to that, their retirement strategy was to live on Social Security and a pension. And a successful strategy to get there was to not have a mortgage, not have debt, own your cars, make your big purchases, so that when you're in your 60s, in your 70s, and your 80s, you had very low overhead. You were living on a pension and Social Security. There were fixed income sources. They technically sometimes went up with inflation, but it didn't seem like it. So the strategy was really just not have a lot of overhead. People didn't focus on having a lot of money. They might have had some cash in the bank, but they didn't accumulate a lot of wealth outside of that. Then, when I got in the industry in the 90s, what we talked about was this three-legged stool strategy. The three-legged stool showed that about a third of your income was going to come from pensions. About a third of your income might come from Social Security. And then a third of your income was going to come from this new source, this new 401k that was starting to pop up at work. And you would contribute into that 401k. And that would grow to be some sufficient amount of money that you could distribute from later on in retirement. And that would cover a lot of your bills. And as you can see over the years, the 401k, which is this line here, really took off, which are employee contribution plans, where the employee is contributing money into a retirement plan. And employer contribution plans, or called defined benefit plans, were on the decline. And this goes from the 80s all the way until 2021. And that three-legged stool that we talked about was kind of turning into a two-legged stool again. Because as retirement plans and pensions were diminishing, even some of the pension plans that are around today, technically, people don't end up getting the pension income out of it. A lot of companies are trying to get out of the pension business of providing income for people for the rest of their life. And they're offering cash buyouts. And then people take that cash buyout of that pension plan and they move that into a retirement plan like an IRA. And it becomes just like their 401k money. So we're really shifting quickly into this two-legged stool. And now most of the people that I meet with don't have a pension at all. They have some Social Security, and they have whatever wealth they have been able to accumulate inside their retirement plan. So all this was happening and really taking hold in the 1990s and the early 2000s, where workplace retirement plans were becoming common. And back then, we were advising people on what to do. And I remember I was brand new into the business in like 1995, 1996. And my senior advisors would tell me, listen, people are going to put money into a pre-tax retirement plan. That pre-tax incentive was this carrot. It was the incentive to save into a retirement plan and change the mindset of believing that you might retire on a pension and Social Security, and adopt this new mindset that you can accumulate wealth on your own and then spend from that money. So that's what we told people. But we assumed that they would fail. I don't think we really internalized that, and we certainly didn't tell people that. But what we told people was that you're going to be in a lower tax bracket when you retire. And so this incentive of putting money away pre-tax up front into a retirement plan and saving yourself a $2,000 or $3,000 of taxes up front, then later on, when you were going to spend that money, you might be in a bracket that's a third of that. Back then, a lot of people were in the 28% tax bracket. And we told a lot of people, you're probably going to be in the 12% tax bracket at that time. And again, we didn't recognize the reality of what we were telling people, but what we were saying is that you were going to fail. We really didn't believe that people would accumulate millions of dollars inside a 401k. I know you could put it on paper and we'd show people that, hey, you might amass this type of fortune. But you got to remember, back in the mid 90s, a really rich person, is defined by the estate tax, had a net worth of $650,000. Anything above that $650,000, and they had to give a large chunk of that money to the government in the form of an estate tax. There were very few millionaires out there. And to tell, the normal person, I guess, everyday people like you and me, that you would be a multimillionaire someday in the future if you just do the right thing, which is put away 10, 15, 20% of your income into a workplace retirement plan. I mean, we said it out loud, but we didn't really fully embrace the reality that would work out that way. So in reality, people that did it right, they did accumulate millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars in a workplace retirement plan. And they do live on Social Security. Some of them do actually still have a pension, but not that many. And the distribution from their 401k, especially those that save, 15% of their income their whole career, they have $1 million, $2 million, or even $3 million inside of that workplace retirement plan. And if they take a lump sum distribution from the pension, they might get $1 million from there, or 600,000, or some pretty big number. And so the reality is that people are distributing money in retirement, and they're not necessarily in a lower bracket than they were when they were working. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of people that really did it right, and they're finding themselves living on more income retired than they did while they worked. The second flaw was that people would spend monthly. Again, we grew up in this mindset that you retire on Social Security and a pension. The goal was to not have overhead. You didn't want to have a mortgage. You didn't want to have car loans. Nobody really knew what student loans were back then. You just didn't have debt. And you bought all your big ticket items. You remodeled your home before you retired. You took care of all that big stuff while you're still working and had that income. Then you retire and you just live on this monthly stipend that comes in every month from pension and Social Security. And even though the 401k was coming into mainstream in the 90s and the 2000s, we still didn't really understand that people were going to spend differently having access to this big chunk of wealth that they created than they did when they would just retire on a pension, Social Security. So now people get to retirement and they still want to remodel their home, or buy a second home, or buy cars, or take big vacations, or have lots of fun out there. Why wouldn't they want to have fun? You know, you don't retire to just sit around. Hopefully you retire to go have a good time. And so people are taking large distributions out of their workplace retirement plans in order to afford the standard of living that they deserve. And when you do that, when you take out big chunks of money, you can have a detrimental effect on your wealth for one major reason. And that's because a large distribution out of a retirement plan, out of a pre-tax retirement plan, is a taxable distribution. As this chart shows, this red line shows an expense. The green line shows an income source. The income source is very low because it's just Social Security. Prior to working, you know, their income and their expense line matched because they had, you know, working income. And then they take a big distribution in that 1 year because they want to do a big remodel on their house. And in that big distribution, because it's so massive and because they had to give a third of it away to the government, it reduces the size of their portfolio. And they take what probably otherwise would have been a real healthy retirement scenario of growth of assets. Their assets start to decline in value. And here you can see it on another view where the distribution, and I just did one big distribution 1 year, but what's more common is people have multiple distributions in many different years that vary in size, and those big distributions come out and it's 100% taxable. So even if somebody was getting ready to retire and thought they'd live on $5,000 or $6,000 a month, kind of consistently, and then they take out 50 grand 1 year and 100 grand another year and 75 grand another year and 40 grand another year. You know, maybe they want to give gifts to their kids, or maybe they want to take a big family vacation to Africa, or maybe they want to put a pool in at the house, or who knows. There's a lot of things that people want to do. And every time those distributions come out, it pushes people into a higher tax bracket. So here, I'm going to show the reality of what it means to be a millionaire. I got two people, John and Kelly. They both save $10,000 into a workplace retirement plan for 30 years. They each earn 9% of return on the investment, And just for simplicity's sake, they're in a combined state and federal tax rate of 30%. They both accumulate $1.3 million by the time they get to retirement. John put his money away pre-tax. And what that means is if John puts $10,000 into a pre-tax retirement plan, that money gets contributed before he's taxed on it. So if he's in a 30% tax bracket, that saved him $3,000 of taxes. He doesn't have to report that $10,000 as income to the federal government. So over the course of 30 years of doing that, John has saved himself $90,000 of taxes. And that seems like a huge win. And that's the story that we told people as they started saving into their pre-tax retirement plans at work back in the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s. Kelly, on the other hand, she never got involved in a pre-tax retirement plan. Instead, she saves into a Roth retirement plan at work. She doesn't save herself anything in taxes. The entire $10,000 that is contributed into the plan is taxable, so doesn't save herself a dime. She also accumulates $1.3 million. They get to retirement. They're both technically millionaires. And John looks like maybe he made the better choice. However, now it's in the fun phase of having saved money. It's when you get to go spend it. And if over 35 years, their account grows by average of 6.5%, we'll assume they're still in a tax rate of 30%, the annual spending will be about $100,000 per year. So over the course of those 35 years, they each will distribute $3.5 million. However, John will have to give over $1 million away in taxes, where Kelly will pocket the entire $3.5 million. Now John's not looking quite as smart as Kelly was on her retirement savings choice. Now, to be fair, back in the 90s, Kelly's option of putting money into a Roth workplace retirement plan instead of a pre-tax 401k wasn't an option. The Roth has been something that's been developing over the last decade, in some cases even further than that. Now the Roth is mainstream at work. I don't know if I have yet to find a retirement plan this year in 2025 for a client or a new client that doesn't have a Roth as an option in their 401k at work. But every time I meet with a new person and I ask them, are they saving as a Roth inside their 401k? Their answer is no. They're saving pre-tax. They're doing what John did, not what Kelly did. And now, unlike this hypothetical example, you have the ability to save as a Roth at work. Here's how I view a pre-tax retirement plan. You put money into this investment, which is, we'll call it your 401k. And the incentive to do that, besides just having money, which should be an incentive enough, is that the government's going to give you a tax break if you put that money in their pre-tax. And like I said, back in the 80s and 90s, and even maybe 2000s, that was extremely important to have some incentive, because we're trying to help society make this shift from being dependent upon a pension and Social Security to establishing their own wealth that could help supplement or maybe become the main source of their retirement. So the way I view it is the government is your business partner, and your business is the 401k. And they bought into your business in small increments over the course of your career. And in John's case, they bought into that business at $3,000 a year by giving John a tax break up front. So it cost the government $90,000 to become your business partner. And then in that scenario, that business partner benefited by receiving over $1 million of income. That's an unbelievable rate of return for that government business partner. $90,000 buy-in, $1 million of revenue that's produced from it. John's part of that equation doesn't look so attractive. What I suggest with a Roth is that you eliminate the business partner from the very beginning. Don't let them buy in. Put the entire $10,000 into your business without any other subsidy or break from the government. And then when you get to retirement, you own that entire business. And you don't have to pay a portion of it out to anybody. It can all go to you. So the other assumption that we had was that people would invest the money, the tax break that the government gave them. So first we said, hey, put this money in the pre-tax retirement plan. You're going to be a lower tax bracket when you get to retirement, and that's going to be your win. And then we're finding out that's not necessarily true. And it's definitely not true for people that really did a good job at it. Then the second flaw was that when you get to retirement, all your expenses are going to be normal. $5,000 a month, $6,000 a month, $10,000 a month, whatever it is. And we didn't predict these abnormal expenses, 50 grand there, 100 grand there, 200 grand there, 75 grand there. The third flaw was that people would take that pre-tax savings and invest it into something else. So in John's example, what we would have told John back in the 90s is, hey, put 10 grand into this 401k. It's going to feel like you're putting $7,000 into the 401k because you're getting a tax break. Then you can take that other $3,000 and you can put that into something else. And sometimes we told people to put it into a Roth IRA outside of work to do a little bit of both. Remember, back then, you couldn't do a Roth inside a 401k, so it wasn't an option. So this was, when Roth came around, this was kind of a nice way to get into the Roth. Or we told them that you could also put the money into like a brokerage account. You could buy stocks, you could buy mutual funds, you could buy other investments. You could buy CDs. I don't know, you could get whatever you want with that other $3,000. The reality is people didn't save the extra money. Whatever tax savings they got just became absorbed into their budget. And I know that because most of the people that I meet with have a 401k. They've got some cash in the bank. They own their home, or, a part of their home. They might have some mortgage on it, but they don't have a lot of other wealth. And if they had taken that advice or, lived that way where they saved that extra tax savings, they would have other assets, and they don't. And so it just didn't work out. That was a flawed assumption that people would save the difference. I've noticed that tax savings gets absorbed by somebody's budget. But on the flip side, everybody that I've talked to where I've said, hey, instead of saving pre-tax into the 401k, change it to saving as a Roth in the 401k. And they'd ask me, well, what'll happen? What's the downside? Well, the downside is that your tax bill is going to go up a little bit because your taxable income is going to be higher by the amount that you used to contribute. And so if you used to contribute $1,000 a month and you used to get a tax break on that, your tax bill might go up by $250 or $300 a month. So in other words, your take-home pay will be $200 or $300 less than what it used to be, depending on your tax bracket. And that kind of seemed like a big deal, but everybody that I talked to that made the change, within a couple of paychecks, they don't even realize it. They saw it maybe the first one or the second one, but they don't even realize it. It just tends to get absorbed into the budget. There's enough things that we spend our money on that we find a way to not buy that extra bag of potato chips or something like that a few times, or not buy that single pop at a store versus the 12 pack if you buy pop. People just got a little bit more efficient in their spending, and they were able to absorb that difference. But now all that money is being invested into a retirement plan, which when they go to spend it will be all tax-free. Another question I get all the time is that if I save my money into the Roth in the 401k, will I still get the company match? And this tends to be confusing for people, but your 401k is your 401k. 20 years ago, when you signed up for your 401k, you had one option. You could put your money in pre-tax. So you'd log into your 401k, you'd go to your contributions, and you'd set the scale. I want to contribute 10% or 15% or 20% or whatever your number was. And automatically that would go in pre-tax. And then whatever the company match was, if you had a company match, they would, maybe if they matched 6% of your income, then they would put that money into that same account. Now, when you log into your 401k and you go to change contribution, you should see a pre-tax option and a Roth option as to how you want to invest the money. And you can put in 10% or 15%, 20%. I know you can't split them. You could put 5 into one and 5 into the other, but I don't think anybody should do that. I think 100% of the money that you contribute should go into the Roth. And whatever the match is, they're matching 6% before, and you're putting 0 into the pre-tax and 10% into the Roth, they're still going to match 6%. It doesn't change. Most companies will take that 6% match and they'll put it into your pre-tax kind of allocation that already exists. And they'll continue to contribute into that. Some companies allow you to tell them, I want to take the match and I want the match to also go into my Roth. And if they allow that, I recommend people do that. But it does not take away from anything or any benefit that the company is giving you. You're just simply electing, do you want to be taxed on the distribution of all this money in your retirement, or do you want to not be taxed? Do you want all of this money to come out tax-free in your distribution in retirement? So the Roth, in my opinion, is infinitely more valuable than having a pre-tax retirement money when you get to retirement, without a doubt. I think it's always been that way. Two things. I don't think we fully, because of these flaws, comprehended how valuable the Roth was as an industry. Now, I've been hammering this thing for a long time now, but I think as an industry as a whole, they didn't really embrace it. They didn't really get how valuable it was. But we're in a very unique situation right now. And I think that the Roth is incredibly more important today than it's ever been. First of all, I say this all the time. We've got the worst fiscal balance sheet in the history of our country. And we have some of the lowest tax rates that we've had since the Great Depression. When you've got those two things going on, there's no part of me that wants to look for a tax break today so that I might pay more taxable income tomorrow. Our debt at the federal government is about $36 trillion. It far exceeds our GDP. And the only time before that we were anywhere close to this was after World War II in 1945. But we have gone way beyond that. And in after 1945, as you can see here, these are the lowest tax rates on the lowest bracket. So, and this chart is from the Federal Reserve. It only goes up to like mid 2010s, 2015, 2016, but I'm going to show you another one that goes up to current. So this is the lowest bracket in our tax system. And the way that our tax system works is if you make X amount of dollars, that's taxed at one tier. And if you make more money, then that portion of more money is taxed at another tier. And if you make more money, then that portion of that tax income is taxed at another tier. We have a tiered tax system so that people that earn more money pay more in taxes than people that earn less money. Works really well. So this shows the lowest income tax bracket going back all the way to the 1910s. And this is the Great Depression era. This is World War II, and this is after World War II, 1945, when we had a fiscal balance sheet that's somewhat similar to what we have today. And as you can see, the lowest tax bracket went up to levels that most people pay today. Most people in the 22 or the 24% tax bracket. And for a very long time, we're looking at a couple of decades, roughly, people in the lowest bracket paid today's normal tax rate. And then it dropped down to 15%-ish. Then it dropped down to 10. And right now, people are paying lower in the lower income ranges, are paying less in taxes than they have ever paid before. Well, since the Great Depression. This is the highest tax bracket. So those in the highest income earners. And again, you can see, we had the war, paid for the war, got into 1945. The war ended. We had a horrible fiscal balance sheet, which had to get fixed. And the highest tax bracket was at 90%. And then it fell to 70. Then it fell to 50. And it's down to some of the lowest levels that it's been basically since the Great Depression, 100 years ago. This chart shows from 1980 all income levels, the top 1% in our country, the top 5%, the top 10%, the top 25%, the top 50%, and the bottom 50%. Everybody is paying less in taxes today as a percentage of their income than they did in 1980. So, by simple math, I think it's inevitable when you have the worst fiscal balance sheet in the history of your country, and you got some of the lowest tax rates in the last 100 years, I think it's inevitable that tax rates are going to be higher in the future than they are today. Even if they're not, I still think the Roth is infinitely better than pre-tax retirement savings plans. However, if tax rates are significantly higher in the future than they are today, for everybody, could be for everybody, lowest brackets and the highest brackets, the Roth is even that much more powerful. So all that I talked about is the difference between contributing into a workplace retirement plan pre-tax, the old school rotary phone traditional method, or contributing into a workplace retirement plan as a Roth, the new age, way better for you. You get to keep all your money, tax-free distribution in retirement. There's another option that people have because, like I said, a Roth 401k wasn't available in 1980. It's now available, and for some people, it's been available for a decade, or maybe even more. But we have all this legacy pre-tax retirement money that we put into pre-tax 401ks and 403bs and 457 plans. What do we do with that? For some people, you might want to take some of that legacy pre-tax money, again, when we're in a position where you have the lowest tax rates in the last 100 years, then you might want to convert some of that money into a Roth. It's called a conversion. When you convert, the amount that you convert is realized as income. This is extremely important to understand. It's no different than if you're 65 years old and you take $100,000 out of your IRA or your 401k, you realize that $100,000 as income and you pay taxes on it. When you do a conversion, the exact same thing happens. Even if you're not spending the money, even if you're not taking the money and putting into your bank account, you're taking the money and going from one retirement plan, which is pre-tax, and moving it into an account within a retirement plan, which is a Roth. So you're not realizing it and having fun with it. But because you move it out of a pre-tax retirement plan into a non-pre-tax retirement plan, you now have to realize that income. And so if you were to convert $100,000, you would have to pay taxes on $100,000 of income. So conversions can be a very powerful tool. And I think a lot of people should convert some of their money. I mean, maybe if you're lucky, some people convert all of that pre-tax stuff into a Roth, but most people can't afford to do that. Because you should really have money outside of your retirement plan to pay for that tax. And most people just don't have that much money laying around that they could pay an extra 30 or 40 or 50 or $100,000 of tax in order to make that conversion. But here's how I'd like you to look at it. When you convert from a pre-tax retirement plan into a Roth, what you're doing is you're buying out your business partner. So back to that analogy I was saying earlier, in a pre-tax retirement plan, the government is your business partner, and they buy into your business in small increments over the course of your career because they give you a little tax break up front. And then they own a big share of your business, your 401k. And then everything you take out for the rest of your life, they're going to get their share of it. Here's something that's very unique about this particular business partner. They get to dictate how much of the business they own. I don't know of any other situations that are like that. Normally, if you have a business partner in your business, you own a certain fixed percentage, they own a certain fixed percentage, and it tends to stay that way. In this case, the government decides what tax rates are, if they're going to increase them or decrease them, and there's nothing you can say or do about it. And when you're in a situation like we're in today, where you have the worst fiscal balance sheet in the history of our country, and you have some of the lowest tax rates in the last 100 years, where it's a lot more likely, just from a math and a logic standpoint, that tax rates will probably going to be higher in the future than they are today. This could be great timing to buy out your business partner, if at least partially, maybe not all of it. So the offer your business partner has on the table right now is to buy them out at a very low rate relative to historical norms and at a value that is probably worth less than it ever will be. And this is driven by market value. So if you got $1 million in your 401k and you're going to retire 15 years from now, it is really, really, really likely, unless you make some nasty decisions, that is going to be worth a lot more than $1 million 15 years from now. So your business is likely to become much more valuable in the future. And so you can buy them out at a reduced value today at a very low rate. And that is how I describe a Roth conversion, is buying out your business partner. Different from a Roth contribution where you just don't engage with that business partner at all. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of what it looks like when people change to pre-tax contribution versus Roth contribution. In this example, this is a 26-year-old maxing out the workplace retirement plan and spending the same net dollar amount. So they save the same dollar amount into the plan, and when they get to retirement, they distribute the same dollar amount out of the retirement plan. The example on the left is this person, like Kelly, saved all of their money into the Roth. They never engaged the business partner. They don't have a business partner. It's all of her money. And when she goes to spend all of this money, she's not spending nearly as much as what the money can grow by. She retires with a whole big chunk of money, same amount as this person over here from a dollar standpoint. However, Kelly's portfolio continues to grow because she's not giving a big chunk of it away in taxes. On the other hand, you have somebody that saves at 26 years old pre-tax into the retirement plan. They accumulate the same amount of money. However, they take out the same amount up front, but the government takes a big chunk along the way. And the difference here is this is technically a pretty healthy looking retirement from the sense that at age 100, they still have plenty of money. It looked like they had a well-funded retirement, even though they were tapping into principal as time went on because of inflation. However, they end up with a little bit less money than they started with. But Kelly, on the other hand, has tons more than she started with. And that is the efficiency realized by having tax-free income instead of taxable income. And these assumptions are based off of today's tax rates. And like I said, if tax rates do actually go up in the future, then the scenario of their Roth savings only looks that much more attractive. I don't think, especially a young person, should ever save pre-tax in a retirement plan. And, I have kids in my 20s, getting out of college. Anybody that has kids or grandkids that are saving pre-tax just because that was the auto enrollment when they got started, or that's what somebody at HR told them they should do, or somebody at HR or a friend said, hey, why don't you do half Roth and half pre-tax? Listen, this paradigm shift into 100% Roth hasn't happened yet. And it's not going to happen, I don't think, if people don't realize the difference of the end game. This example shows somebody that is closer to retirement, saving pre-tax, and the scenario on the left, they continue that way for the remaining years of their employment. On the scenario to the right, they make some Roth conversions for 3 years, putting themselves up to the top of the 24% tax bracket. So they're 55 years old, convert at age 55, 56, 57, some of their pre-tax money, but even equally important, they stop saving pre-tax and they start saving as a Roth. And on the scenario on the left, the person that only saved pre-tax, even though they're 55 years old, it still makes a huge difference. And this person on the left, under the same spending assumptions in retirement, the same gross distribution in retirement, ends up looking like they're probably going to run out of money before age 100. The person on the right has a very healthy looking asset accumulation where they reach peak assets much later on in life. And even at age 100, still have more money than when they first retired. So even in your 50s, you can make a big difference. All right. I got to redo all that. So this scenario shows somebody that's 55 years old, married, converting to the top of the 24% tax bracket for 3 years. So they convert some money at age 55, age 56, and age 57. Retire and take the same distribution out of their retirement plan as the person on the left. So here's the person that does conversions, and here's a person that just keeps saving pre-tax into their retirement plan. And having that extra money in the Roth, just 3 years of conversions, was enough to put them over the edge of looking like they probably didn't have enough money to fund their retirement. Based on this distribution, they would probably run out of money before age 100. You know, that's the big challenge. We never know how long we're going to live. But anyways, this person on the right that made those 3 years of Roth conversions, that was enough to tip the scales. And because they bought out their business partner on some of their money for 3 years, that was enough to make it so that that tax-free income in retirement put them over the top, and they actually get to age 100 with more money than what they retired with. Now, this scenario takes it a step further, and it shows that same person that's saving pre-tax at age 55 through the rest of their retirement. Again, looks like they might run out of money before age 100. But the person on the right not only converted for 3 years, 55, 56, 57, but they also stopped saving pre-tax into the retirement plan and instead started contributing as the Roth for the rest of their career. And you can see what a dramatic difference that makes, these two things combined. The Roth contribution for the last decade of their career and having a little bit of that money converted was enough to take them probably well into their age 100s, or at least give them a much higher standard of living if that's what they want. Both of these scenarios, I have the person distributing the same dollar amount, but clearly this person on the right could do more in retirement if they wanted to. Here's the end game reality, is that once we're 60 years old, 59 and a half technically, we would all wish that all of the wealth that we owned was in a Roth, not in a pre-tax retirement plan. Because in a Roth, it's all your money. You don't have to give a portion of it away every time you take a dollar out. And in a pre-tax retirement plan, you're signing this contract with a business partner that they get to take the first chunk that comes out every single time you want a dollar. And the reason that we save money is to accumulate money. We don't save money just to have it. We save money to build it up, hopefully accumulate millions of dollars, get into retirement, and have the time of our life. And so it's extremely important to pay attention to where we save that money. And I can't tell you how many people I talk to that I asked them, I meet them for the first time, and I asked them, are you saving pre-tax in a retirement plan, or are you saving as a Roth in a retirement plan? Most people haven't really understood that they can make the change yet. I've yet to come across a person that wasn't already a client of mine that says, yes, I'm saving into the Roth. If I've seen that, they are also saving into the pre-tax. So I've seen some people say, yes, I'm saving as a Roth, half of it, and the other half is going into the pre-tax. I have yet to come across anybody that has been fully committed to the Roth. And the reality is the end game is so dramatically different. And we need to make this big paradigm shift from thinking that we should save our money pre-tax in a retirement plan that, number one, will be in a lower bracket when we retire. I don't think that's going to be the case. And number two, you don't want it to be the case. You want to succeed at saving money for retirement. You want to accumulate lots and lots of money and spend lots and lots of money and have a great time in retirement. The goal isn't just to get there and just make it through. The goal of wealth at some point is to enjoy it. And you go through your entire career taking a percentage of your income, socking it away, making those sacrifices for decades so that someday later you can spend it. Get the most out of it. Make sure that you're putting that money into the Roth workplace retirement plan. If you have any questions on how this works, or if it's still confusing for you, we have lots of videos on our website, or call us, talk to us. We'll help you get through it. And if you do understand how this works, please help spread the word, because this paradigm shift needs to happen. Thank you.
Ta-da!